My first guest this week is Andrew Biggio. He is the author of The Rifle, Combat Stories from America's Last World War II Veterans, told through an M1 Garand. And as the title states, he tells these stories through the eyes and the memories of these World War II veterans, but he ties the story together by sticking the M1 in their hand, the gun that they carried when they were servicemen. Here is the first segment of our interview. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege, honestly.
So the book has a really interesting premise, The Rifle. And I first want to ask, what made you write the book?
Well, I guess being a veteran myself started the whole process. And I did a tour in Iraq, Afghanistan. I came home, and it really bothered me to see a sign at the end of my street that said Andrew Biggio Square. And that's my name, obviously. But it was a square that was not dedicated to me. It was dedicated to my grandfather's brother, who was killed in World War II. And it wasn't until I came home from Afghanistan that I started to read his last letters he wrote home before he was killed, and how much he enjoyed the M1 rifle. So I kind of wanted to connect with this long lost relative. And I went out and I bought an M1 rifle, which was the standard rifle of that time of World War II, just to feel it and hold it. And that's where the journey began.
Yeah. So at the beginning of the journey, you got this idea, you start to do that. Now, I don't think as I went through that the plan, you had this grand plan initially to get all these signatures, which we'll talk about later, and to go meet all these people. So it obviously progressed over time. And talk a little bit. I like how it started with your neighbor. So right. you had this curmudgeon, the get off my lawn type, who didn't really talk to you. And you go over there and you saw this change. That's why you knew that there was something about this rifle. Talk about that a bit.
Sure. So I get the rifle. I'm in my own living room holding it, playing, G.I. Joe. And then I'm like, it just doesn't suffice for me. I'm holding this rifle. It's great. But I'm showing it to family members. They view it as just a gun, and so I had a little light bulb over my head. I'm like, Joe, who lives down the street from me, was at the Battle of Okinawa. He's 91 years old. Let me go show him my new rifle, see what happens. And I rang his doorbell. He answers. And, at age 92, his legs had atrophied to being very skinny. He's very frail. He's not able to move a lot, not around to get around the house. There were times where I was, bringing him some, takeout dinner, that kind of thing. And here I am now saying, hey, Joe, remember this? And I placed the rifle into his hands, and you would have thought he was 19 again. He puts it in his shoulder. He's aiming in. He's waving it around, and I have to duck practically. And he starts going into the Battle of Okinawa. He starts talking. We talked for 2 hours, and I recorded all on my iPhone, just everything he's telling me about the Battle of Okinawa. And I said, I never want to forget this moment. Sign my rifle. I want you to sign the buttstock of my rifle. And he didn't want to at first. He didn't want to mark up such a beautiful weapon, as he called it. And eventually, of course, I forced him to add his name to it. I insisted. And I left his house looking down at his name on that rifle. And I said, oh, my God, I need to get as many signatures as possible. And now I have over 200 names on the rifle. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was just been, this is, 5 to 6 years of meeting America's last World War II veterans. And I chose 22 of their stories, the best stories from my book.
And in one note, I like to shoot. Most people don't, but I have never had an M1. So you got to understand, you set it up about how frail he was and all that. People got to understand that's not an 8-ounce rifle you're holding there, right? So when he lit up and he's swinging that thing around, it's got some weight to it.
Yeah. For 92, so the youngest veteran I ended up meeting was about 90, let's reverse 5 years. So 92. The oldest veteran I met is 105. Mm-hmm. And the rifle, the first thing out of their mouth was, are you sure this is what I carry? There's no way that this was this heavy, and there's, I believe it's 9.5 pounds is the M1 Garand, but for them it's, it's a heavy, long piece of equipment.
Right. So you talk about the A's. That's the next thing I want to talk about, because now you have an idea. You have a framework. You want to do this. Extremely interesting. You're going to get some amazing stories, as you obviously do. You only selected some of them. But like you say, they're up in A's. So, I mean, you're focused obviously on the stories themselves, but I was just interested as a reader and, in being interested in you in this process. How do you do this? I mean, these are older people. Many of them at home, you figure they're not moving all around, but still you got to find them. So what was the process like of finding them, narrowing them down, getting to them because they're all over the place? What was that like?
So it's funny, my book came out yesterday, and for the last week and then this week, I've been doing, some interviews and podcasts, and no one's asked me that question. No one's asked me, how the hell do I find these guys?
Wow.
Because it's not like they are walking the streets anymore. They're not. They're very rare to find. There was once 16 million World War II veterans. Now there's less than 300,000 in the whole country. All right. Okay. How did I find them? It took, after Joe, my neighbor, of course, I wanted to, I heard his story about the Pacific. Well, now I want someone who fought in Europe or the Battle of the Bulge. Well, where do I find it? So it took a lot of research. It took a lot of looking into specific divisions, looking at after action reports with people's names in them, people that were wounded, people that were captured, people that, were there, got a Bronze Star, got a Silver Star, taking those names and then doing internet searches, white pages, yellow pages, obituaries. Are they still alive? Do they have a home line? Do they have a grandkid on Facebook? I did that a few times. A friend requested the grandson. Hey, is your grandfather Private Joe Smith? This is my rifle project. This is what I want to do. And that's what I did. I did my homework. I did a lot of hard work locating these men from specific divisions because I wanted to write stories that were not told a lot. In World War II history, there's a lot of focus on the 101st Airborne, the D-Day invasion, the flag raising on Iwo Jima. But there was just, 100 other divisions that, have been historically written about, but not blown up by basically modern media. No, they don't have HBO's miniseries. They don't have documentaries. They don't have movies and in the hype. So I chose a lot of men in that book, and on that rifle were divisions that most people who have basic knowledge of World War II didn't even know about.
But that process is amazing hearing you that. I'm glad you told me that. But I thought of it, I guess, because my dad was that age and he was in the military, but I don't know where he served, which is interesting. You talk about the grandparents, reaching out to people on Facebook about that, because so he was born in 1920 and he enlisted in 39 or 40, but I don't know where he was, but I know that, we'll talk about that too when you get into your interviews about, because these are men who the ones who came back, they held their memories of what they went through, and they don't really talk about it much, right? So,
so let me hold on one second. Let me just ask you a question. I know we're talking about my book. So your father. Now you go hunt him down for me. No, I'm kidding. I've done it. I've done it. I've solved a lot of mysteries on doing this. Right. So your dad was definitely in the Army during World War II, right?
Yeah, right.
What year did he pass away?
2000.
In 2000, how old was he?
He was 80 when he died. He was born in 1920.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, black male, I'm assuming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that only narrows it down to certain segregated units. Okay. Because then that's where we start looking.
Right.
Because I have multiple men on my rifle, Black American veterans of units people never even heard about, segregated, anti-aircraft units. I just went and saw one of my favorite veterans on the rifle. From what we know, he's the last Black World War II veteran from the 761st Tank Battalion. This was the only Black tank unit to see action in France, in Europe. He was severely wounded in France. He still has the shrapnel in his arms. I went all the way to Alabama just to deliver him a early copy of my book because I love the guy so damn much. And I'm hoping to bring him back to France for the first time ever since he was wounded. Because not only was he wounded, but then he came home and got treated like a piece of crap. You know what I mean? Because of
right,
color.
and that's that. Yeah, right.
So he comes home in bandages, in casts, on crutches, and they're still telling him to stand on the other side of the train station. You're not coming on this bus. I mean, imagine wearing that uniform, being severely wounded, and getting treated like that. I took great pleasure in writing his chapters. So I would literally love to find out who your dad was with, if he made it across. He most likely did, though. I believe they said anywhere between 200,000 and 300,000 Black Americans, veterans in World War II.
Coming up, more with Andrew Biggio, author of The Rifle. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, more of The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back. I am continuing my conversation with Andrew Biggio, author of The Rifle. And in this segment, I asked him about the vets. Their stories are very gripping and important for us to save as they get older and they leave us. But you know, we always hear the stories about veterans not wanting to talk about the war. So I asked him, did he get a lot of doors slammed in his face, or were people open and ready to talk to him? Here's his response.
Both, right? So you have it. The overall picture was, Daddy doesn't like talking about the war. Papa never talks about the war. So he'll happily sign your rifle, but I don't know if he's going to want a camera stuck in his face. And that's fine. And I think what I told them was I gave them an ultimatum. I said, I am a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. You're not doing anybody any good in this younger generation of veterans coming home on how to live a successful life after combat. If we hear your story, we can say, hey, if you did it, so can we. So please, this is it. It's now or never. You're 95 years old. Your own kids don't even know what you did. Your own grandkids. And boy, I opened them up. I did on that one. Some people took a little bit more effort where I would sit down, hand write a letter, because that's who those kind of men are back then. Mm-hmm. Hand wrote a letter, attached photos of the different veterans signing my rifle. Next thing you know, hey, come on by. I love what you're doing. I've had doors close on me and I've reopened them. I want to say of the 200 veterans, I had one that was still not one, probably still not, refused everything. So I had a good track record.
Obviously, you limited the book, but you've talked to a couple hundred, obviously, right? At least.
Yeah. So, I've talked to exactly on the dot 200 veterans. Yeah.
And you mentioned the camera. Do you record them all? I didn't. Side note, I didn't know that.
When I first started off, I didn't, because I was too nervous to basically say, hey, can I come to your house at age 96 years old where you're dealing with a lot of health issues and just blast a camera in your face? I felt very intrusive. I didn't want to do it like that. So I would just slide my iPhone, right? And just press record while I talked to them. Then I got a little bit more courage after a few interviews, and I would start holding it like that. And then next thing you know, I buy a $4,000 Canon camera, and now it's like, I wish I could have reversed and did it, but that wasn't me. That wasn't what really I was doing. I wanted to write. I wanted to hear their story. I didn't want to stick a camera in their face. We're taught, even as veterans today, like anyone who blabbers to the camera is trying to be a war hero hotshot. So I know that stigma probably still floated from World War II to present day, but I was very successful in capturing the stories. I could have done better if I reversed 5 years with a high-tech camera and a boom mic and all this crazy stuff. But yeah, I think a lot of them like to bond just veteran to veteran.
So how many did you get recorded on video?
I'll say it like this. I have photography, audio, and video of all 200.
So you talk to all these people, they tell these stories, similar time. There's going to be some similarities and differences, and obviously based on where they were, what made them enlist, all that kind of thing. So can you give me one or two of the most common things that they all said, and then something that surprised you?
The common thread was, believe it or not, everyone has this thought that, the World War II, and they are the greatest generation, no argument there. But a lot of the guys did not raise their hand and join. A lot of guys I talked to, their asses were drafted. And I think that was the common theme. Was I thought I was going to meet all 200 veterans saying, yeah, I was, after Pearl Harbor, I was running down to the recruiting station, and guys were like, no, I didn't want to leave home. I was scared. I got drafted, So that was actually pretty common amongst them all. from the Medal of Honor recipients down to the Joe Schmoes. And then I guess one thing that surprised me was they think my wars were harder than theirs somehow. They can't fathom that in Iraq and Afghanistan, you're fighting an enemy that doesn't wear a uniform. You're in the desert. It's just and I'm like, okay, well, I definitely rather have had my deployments than yours and storm Omaha Beach or jump out of an airplane into a enemy territory, but they think, our generation post 9/11 wars are more complicated than theirs. And in a way, I can definitely see what they're saying, because, in World War II, they had a front line. When they took land, they owned it. It wasn't this just kind of like song and dance policing type wars that we've been doing. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that is interesting. So now, obviously, you're not taking away all these men are great and unique and like you say, some are Medal of War recipients and the Medal of Honor recipients and all these different types of things, but they all serve. You made it a point to the 22 of all people who actually saw battles. So you're not taking away anything from them. But I do want to say, you narrowed that down to 22 here. Can you give me one or two who really stood out for you?
Of the 22 in the book, or just 22 on the rifle?
Book. Yeah, of the 22 in the book.
I say it all the time. I told you about Robert Andre living in Alabama, his story with Patton's Panthers is what they call themselves, the 761st Tank Battalion. Yep. And his story is just unmatched. It's unbelievable. I think that I think this book is going to blow his life up. He's a quiet man who lives in the town of Bucks, Alabama. Mm-hmm. He worships all day on Sundays, had 8 children. He's a quiet man, never went to an association, never went to a meeting, never went to a reunion. I think this book is going to start getting him some fan mail and some press. And I feel bad for that, but good Lord, I had to share his story. And being one of the, his chapter, right? So you have this black tank unit, the 761st Tank Battalion. It's coming aboard Omaha Beach. It starts to move forward. It's meeting up with Patton's troops outside the town of Nancy, France, right? Then you have these white infantry units who says, please don't give us the black tank unit. We don't want to work with them. Are they even any good? Do they suck? Are they bad? This is the first time they're experimenting with black men in armor in World War II. So you have this white infantry unit, right? From Boston, the 26th Division, the Yankee Division, okay? And this is going to be, how the hell is this going to work out, okay? And then what ends up happening is, I think both parties, the 761st Tank Battalion and the 26th Infantry Division, get a lesson on racism, and your race means shit in war, okay? Because they end up fighting for each other. They end up dying for each other. You see black tankers coming to the aid of white infantrymen. You have white infantrymen running to destroyed tanks, pulling black tankers out, dying for each other on the very streets of the town of Morville in France. And this is a wake-up call to both parties. And it's unfortunate it took a world war for these particular men, to be educated on race when they're dying for each other, and they realize it doesn't matter. And the real enemy is the damn Germans. And so I took great pleasure in writing that article, and I read Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's book, who wrote a book about the 761st Tank Battalion, and I read Joe Wilson's book, who wrote a book about 761st, and then I went and interviewed from what we know is the last survivor, from what I found. And I took awesome pleasure in that. And I think, I also can't forget the first signature on the rifle, Joe Drago, who was a Marine in Okinawa. Do you want me to start talking about him, or do you have any comments about the tanker?
You can go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah. And Joe was the first person to sign my rifle. He's since passed away. Mm-hmm. And he really taught me that the greatest generation sometimes wasn't so great, because what they did to win World War II. I mean, the chapter is called No Such Thing as a War Crime because of the way the Marines treated the Japanese And in return, the way the Japanese treated the Marines, I mean, it was a macabre fighting. We're talking about removing of gold teeth, driving around with a head strapped to your Jeep, putting skulls on pikes. I mean, this is stuff, brutal, total war that was used to win the Battle of Okinawa. And that's stuff that we could never do today. And that's what, Joe thought. The fact that Marines actually got in trouble in 2010 for urinating on dead Taliban, he thought that was a joke. He said that was nothing compared to what we used to do. So those are two men, I think, who start, Joe made me feel like that, I don't have to live in the shadows of the greatest generation, that they were just boys in a tragic time of war.
Coming up, more with Andrew Biggio, author of The Rifle, combat stories from America's last World War II veterans, told through an M1 Garand. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
Nothing else matters.
Now, more of The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer, with your host, Charles Love.
Welcome back. I am continuing my conversation with Andrew Biggio, author of The Rifle. And here he relates his experience in the military with that of the men he interviewed. And he tells me what similarities they have and what he learned from them. And we also talk about how much of the war he covered, which was interesting, trying to interview someone from every theater and different divisions. I kind of pivot to you a little bit because you're a vet serving tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. So first I want to ask you, how were your experiences similar to theirs as you hear these stories?
I think when they talk about the German 88s, which is, the standard artillery piece of World War II, and what the artillery shell would do to human bodies, what it would do to U.S. soldiers, the carnage, and it was the number one casualty conflictor of the war was artillery. And I think about, I guess, the IEDs in Afghanistan, how they mangled bodies and killed people. And when these guys talk about looking at their friends all mangled up or looking at another soldier in pieces, naturally I think of the same stuff, and I know what they're talking about.
Right. And then you talking about that, you talk about your experience and how you like you saw some situations and, and I believe it was an IED, right? That you were like triggered. And when you hear, you described what was the sound in the store? There was a sound in the store.
Yeah, I think, there was just one particular time. I had seen dead and wounded guys time and time again, but there was a particular time where I was in a grocery store and this old lady's carrying a melon and she dropped it off her shopping carriage and it just goes like a thud, like a meaty thud on the linoleum floor of the shopping. And for some reason, all I could think about was a particular scene in Afghanistan of these two Afghans trying to carry one of their pals that got killed and they accidentally drop him on the cement. And he's dead anyway, but just that noise brought back some stuff to me. And then that's when I really I said the survivor's guilt started to hit and I started to look into my great uncle that was killed in World War II himself.
Yeah, I wanted to get to that too. See, a nice segue. Part of you talked about in the book saying you got this street name and you didn't know much about him. Did you ever find anything else about, in all your research, you finding out these people, what did you find out about him?
Again, it's funny. You and I have stayed on the theme of disproving the movies and Hollywood of everything is victorious and the World War II generation of these swing dancing, milkshake drinking, everything's happy type time. And his story was a true story of not necessarily defeat, but it was mutiny. There was retreat. There was subordination to orders. They were stuck on a hill in Italy. And I found survivors from that particular battle, men refusing to go up the hill any further because it was suicide. The Germans just had the guns pointing down on them with no cover. and this company is decimated, including my great uncle. Mm-hmm. And I met 2 survivors from that time frame, and the only reason why they're alive is because they also refused to go up the hill. And my uncle and his squad were killed. So it's a sad ending, but we all knew, it happens. But I don't think my great grandparents ever sought to want to know.
Right, know the specifics of it, because that's so heavy. So, so what next with the rifle? You got room for more? Are you going to go until you get all of them? Because I know they're, because of age, we're losing a lot of them every day, right? So
I think I'm going to do probably 5 or 10 more guys or girls. I have women on the rifle too, nurses and such that were in World War II. But I have like maybe 8 more interviews planned, and I got to call it a day, man. It's been it's been awesome. I now have had a son born in the middle of it. And, it's not my day job, and I need to really focus on my family. And it's just been a great journey meeting America's last World War II veterans, because I know my son, who's 2 years old, is never going to get to talk to one.
Right. How much of the war did you cover, I guess?
Pretty good. I wanted to cover the whole war on the rifle. Now, did I get every division of the U.S. Army in World War II? No. But I represented the Air War, the Navy, the Marines, the Army. I represented almost every major battle in the Pacific, every major battle in Europe, so I do have some loose ends. I represented every person that earned a medal, from the Medal of Honor down to a Bronze Star. And obviously, important, the segregated units, not to forget. I have the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which was all Japanese Americans who were not allowed to fight in the Pacific. So they were sent to Italy, and they ended up becoming the most highly decorated infantry regiment of the whole war. And the Tuskegee Airmen, the 761st Tank Battalion. Let's not forget the Native American Code Talkers. So those were important names to get on my rifle as well.
Coming up, more with Andrew Biggio, author of The Rifle, Combat Stories from America's Last World War II Veterans, told through an M1 Garand. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
The Charles Love Show continues on AM 560, The Answer. Here's Charles Love.
Welcome back. I am continuing my conversation with Andrew Biggio, author of The Rifle. And here I took a little detour from the book, because it's not often I get an opportunity to do so. His day job is as a Boston police officer. And so here we got into a little conversation about policing in America and what is currently going on in the country.
I personally think a lot of cops my age, the 30s and under, we join the police force to be heroes, right? And I think we're getting an education on perhaps police officers, a lot of police officers, older and from the past, who might have done some serious damage amongst communities, whether it's corruption, racism, a lot of stuff. Now our younger generation of cops are really trying to make up for that. We really are. And we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. So I basically, the police job is harder than being a Marine. And I mean that psychologically, because you are a enforcer, you are a police officer, you're a social worker, you're an elderly care worker, you're a psychologist. I can go down the list of everything you are. You are the problem solver, right? So I 100%, and I don't care what side of the fence you're on, that police need reform. There's nothing. It's the absolute truth. I've been a cop for 7 years in the state of Massachusetts. I've had plenty of opportunities to shoot people and shoot Black Americans, which I've never done. I've never pulled the trigger. I've had more, and I give myself credit, and I've been accommodated with actual medals for not killing someone. Is every situation different? Yes, of course. I cannot speak for a cop in another situation somewhere in the country, but it's evident there needs to be some nationwide reform. Now, that doesn't mean I believe in reform that's going to put officers in more danger, but we need some type of reform, because standing on a guy's neck for 10 friggin' minutes. Where the hell is that learned? Where was that taught? It's not. There's no defending it. I don't care what anyone says. We're conservative, liberal. I'm a cop. I usually lean to the right side of things, and that has screwed up everything in this country. Is seeing that. That was the first time I did not want to put on my uniform going to work after seeing that. But, you know, it was tough because it didn't help with the protests and the rioting. Even say like, hey, we agree with you. That was screwed up. You know, we agree with you on this one. It was a bad year. It was a very bad year. And that's what really drove me to get on a plane and meet Mr. Andrew, who experienced racism from 75 years ago until now. I'm like, if this is the way it is, what have I been missing as a white male growing up in America thinking everything was roses? What have I been missing? And that's why I specifically saw it. I have Rothacker Smith on my rifle, who was with the 92nd Buffalo Soldiers. He fought in Italy. He was the second black man in his county to vote. Mm-hmm. Meeting someone like that who marched with Dr. Martin Luther King and things like that. I mean, they really brought me back to the origin of all this, the snowball effect, right?
But, you know, what you said was probably the most important and saddest thing about this whole police issue. You know why? It's because everything you said made total sense. It's coming from a white cop. And most people can get with it and be like, okay, that's sensible. The problem is those who want reform, you even said reform. And I feel bad because it's never going to happen. And the reason it's never going to happen is not because politicians won't do it, not because blacks or whites or Democrats or Republicans. It's because what you just said is not allowed to be said because you're a police officer. And the problem is, so you want to solve the police problem without including police at all. So you want to solve the police problem and the police don't get to be at the table. So you want to take the agitators and the politicians and people who've never policed, put them all around the table and say, what should the police do? It never will work that way. Even if all the police are racist, they still need to be at the table because they're the ones that actually have to do it. But they don't want to.
The thing is reform is a scary word here in Massachusetts. And that's not because the actual definition of reform, all reform means is a little bit of fixing. Okay. It doesn't mean take away my service pistol. It doesn't mean take away my service pistol. It doesn't mean all misdemeanors are now no longer crimes. Basically, the reason why the word reform got so poisoned is because there are certain things, certain languages, it all depends what state you're from. I have no idea what Minnesota's doing. You know, I'm talking about Massachusetts. There's certain things in that reform bill that could hurt cops, could damage cops, could put a cop's life in danger. So that's why some cops, you know, they're like, la, 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 I don't want to hear the word reform, you know, that kind of thing. But yes, you need to bring us to the table. We want to live, we want to protect, but I don't know. I just think it's, it kind of goes, you know, the media is pumping, they're replaying videos from years ago on particular police abuse. You know, since when does an officer slapping somebody in a video in Kentucky make national headlines? Like now they're just saying, oh, this is hot. Cop abuse is hot. And it's every single night. Man, I would love to see things reverse right now because I love my day job. Capital L, I love it. And this was the most testing year for my job. I don't like putting on the national news and my occupation being the center of conversation every night. I want to go back to doing the right thing. But, you know, the media somehow thinks our job is pretty and that the word you're under arrest is a suggestion. It's like you either put your hands behind your back, you're under arrest, or I have to figure out a way to put you in my car, put you in handcuffs. You know, I hope all I can do is pray that things change and that we can restore faith in the badge.
As we can see through Andrew's comments, this is not so black and white, but unfortunately, people don't want to hear from people like him. Coming up, my final segment with Andrew Biggio, author of The Rifle. You're listening to The Charles Love Show on AM 560, The Answer.
You like me and I like you.
The Charles Love Show continues on AM 560, The Answer. Here's Charles Love.
Welcome back. we've reached the final segment with Andrew Biggio, author of The Rifle, Combat Stories from America's Last World War II Veterans, told through an M1 Garand. And here I asked him what he hopes to get out of the stories that he got from the veterans, and to talk a bit about the charity he works with. And lastly, I know you got a day job, you got to work, you got to do all that kind of stuff, but you got 22 stories in there, you got 200 signatures. Can we see The Rifle too?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. So,
because you could put some of the other stories in it. I think it could be. You're limited to 20, and now you got 10 books. You just you keep dripping different, because everybody's story is going to be a little bit different, right? How they reacted to it, where they were, what they saw is through their own eyes. I think it would be. I mean, because the stories that I read here were great, so I can imagine what some of the other ones would be as well. I guess I want to end talking about the work you do, the proceeds from the book, the work you do, and how this helps it, focusing on and bringing awareness to and trying to help wounded veterans.
So yeah, I've been running I'm a police officer full time. That's how I make my living. But on the side for the last 11 years, I've run an organization called Boston's Wounded Veterans. And it's a motorcycle charity ride that helps severely wounded veterans injured in Iraq and Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. No salaries collected from that nonprofit. What we do is we help rebuild apartments, do housing modifications, buy these veterans brand new cars, pay off their debt, just anything that maybe the Veteran Affairs won't do. We step in to help with this motorcycle charity ride. And we have it every year, and thousands of people show up, and we pick different wounded veterans from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, or post 9/11 veterans every year to give all the funds to. So a portion of each of my book definitely goes to that nonprofit that can run that nonprofit.
Oh, don't stop. This hour is yours. I mean, give them the info, tell them the website, tell them when it is. Go ahead. Give them all that.
Yeah. So my website is theyfoughtwe'dride.com. And we have multiple motorcycle rallies all through the United States. Boston is our biggest one. But if they go to theyfoughtwe'dride.com, they can actually see, in case they're from New York and they want to, ride in the New York Wounded Vet Run. But what I've done with some of that money is bring these World War II veterans back to where they fought over in Europe. So last December, I raised about I keep forgetting about COVID. So let's go 2 years ago. On the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge, I raised $75,000, ironically 75th and 75, to bring back 16 World War II veterans. I brought them back, and a family member, back to Belgium, where they fought during the Battle of the Bulge. I got to see their foxholes. I got to show them where they were captured, wounded. 10 of the 16 had never returned in 75 years. And I was given the honor to bring them back. And, when I think about that, I think I cried on the plane ride home. I just kept a jacket over my head because I was crying knowing that I had just pulled something off pretty damn good. So.
Well, thank you for your service and your even harder service that you currently do. And now he is Andrew Biggio, Marine veteran, Boston police officer, and president of New England's Wounded Veterans Incorporated. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, brother. Thank you.
Again, the book is The Rifle, Combat Stories from America's Last World War II Veterans, told through an M1 Garand. Andrew Biggio is the author. The foreword is written by Medal of Honor recipient Woody Williams. It's got everything you want. The story's a phenomenon. And like I said, it's 20 out of 200. He's got 200 signatures on his rifle and more stories to tell. We need to keep these firsthand accounts. So please go pick up the book